DPP. There we go. All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Daily Power Parsha. Today is Tuesday, July 20th, and we have so much to talk about. We have so much to talk about because we are in middle of the second Torah portion of the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Devarim, that is called Ve'et Chanan. Okay, and I am going to bring up the reading. We're actually in the middle of reading number 2 because reading 2 is so long. We only got halfway through it yesterday. So we did reading 1 and then half of reading 2. Today we're going to finish off reading 2 and hopefully jump into reading 3, which corresponds to today, which is, of course, Tuesday. So let's jump in. Again, collection of Moses' final words to the people. I think I cut out for a second. Let's see if you guys can see me, can hear me. Can you guys hear me and see me?
Yes.
Checking in, checking. Okay, great. So these are Moses' final words of inspiration to the people before his passing. And yesterday we spoke about Moses recalled in the presence of the generation that was to summit and enter the land of Israel, the promised land. He spoke to them about Sinai and how God, imageless God, spoke to them, and how that should be enough of a instilling in their brains, in the Jewish mind for all time, that God does not have an image, and thus we should not serve idols, create graven images, and worship them, etc. Okay, that was the discussion yesterday. So essentially, it was kind of this anti-idolatry message: do not serve idols, do not create graven images, and all that good stuff. Now we're up to verse 25, I believe. I think we went up to this, verse 25. All right, here we go. When you beget children and children's children. Okay, in other words, you'll have kids and they'll have kids, the generations will go on, and you will be long established in the land. So again, this is looking down, Moses speaking to the people. They're going to be going into Israel. And he says, let's think a little bit ahead. Let's do some planning. So you'll be living in the land for a long time. You'll have kids, you'll have grandkids, and you become corrupt and make a graven image, the likeness of anything, and do evil in the eyes of the Lord your God to provoke him to anger. Moses says, if that happens, or when, God forbid, that might happen, I call, listen to this, I call as witness against you this very day, the heaven and the earth. By the way, this is the Torah reading that we read on a fast day, just so you know. Ki solid banim uvnei vanim. This is what's read. It was read on Tisha B'Av, just on Sunday, a few days ago, 2 days ago in the morning. We read this Torah reading. Talks about turning away. Moses promises that if we turn away from, warns, if we turn away from God, it's not going to be good. So Moses says, I call as a witness against you this very day. Who am I calling to witness? The heaven and the earth. You know, those are witnesses that could still be around for a while. You call witness a person, they're going to be gone in 120 years. But you call heaven and earth, they'll be around for generations. So I call as witness against you this very day, the heaven and the earth, that you will speedily and utterly perish. If you turn away from God and worship idols, it ain't going to end well. You will speedily and utterly perish, God forbid, from the land to which you cross the Jordan to possess. You will not prolong your days upon it, but will be utterly destroyed. And here is one of the many, many, many times that Moses, in his prophecy in the book of Deuteronomy, predicts or warns, or predicts also and warns and prophecies that if the Jews turn away from God, if they turn away from monotheism, if they worship idols, if they provoke God's anger, so to speak, God doesn't actually get angry. We get angry, but if they turn against God, it's not going to end well. It just simply won't end well. And the specific, what does it mean won't end well? That's it's a very vague threat. Specifically, Moses says, you will not remain in the land. And you know what that means in English? Jewish exile. We can relate, right? We can relate, having been exiled for the last 1950 plus years. Yeah, we can relate. Moses says, if you turn against God, you will not prolong your days upon the land. It will be utterly destroyed. And the Lord will scatter you among the peoples. Sound familiar? We call this exile, diaspora, right? The Lord will scatter you among the peoples, and you will remain few in number among the nations to where the Lord will lead you. And there, in exile, you will worship gods, man's handiwork, wood and stone, which neither see, hear, eat, nor smell. In other words, it's piling idolatry on idolatry. The original problem is that you turned away from God and served idols, or you were, let's just use a phrase, you were cheating on God. So God says, all right, you're now evicted from the land. So then you go into foreign nations and there's subjugation. And it's difficult. You're few in number. You're under the thumb of some other nation, some other superpower or power. And to compound the problem, everyone there worships idols. So then it's going to be even more attractive. What's the word I'm looking for? We will be more susceptible to continuing the problem of worshiping idols. And you will worship gods, man's handiwork, wood and stone, which neither see, hear, eat, nor smell. I mean, that line is so powerful, because that's really what idol worship is, worshiping that which cannot see, hear, eat, nor smell. Let's continue. And from there, you will seek the Lord your God. Verse 29, and from there, uvikashta misham, and from there, from your place of challenge, of difficulty, of pain, of suffering, from the disconnection, that will ultimately stir the rebound. Here we talk about the rebound of teshuvah, of coming back to God. From there, from that dark, spiritually dark place, you will seek the Lord your God. I mean, I know I'm throwing a lot of commentary here, but I just want to make sure that this is coming off the page, that this is alive, that we're living with this. I mean, we're supposed to live with the Torah reading. Sometimes it's from the depths of despair that the greatest inspiration comes. Sometimes it's from the sense of disconnection, from the sense of loss. I messed up. I ruined this relationship. I can't believe what I did, right? I'm now not where I want to be. It's from there that it stirs the greatest desire to reconnect. And that's exactly what the Torah is saying, is that from hitting rock bottom, that actually propels the rebound back up to a better place. So from there, you will seek the Lord your God. And again, from there means from the darkness specifically. And because of the darkness, you will seek the Lord your God and you will find him. If you seek him with all your heart and with all your soul. In other words, if you genuinely want to reconnect, you will be able to reconnect. This is the path that's open. You would think that, well, if you turn away from God, you get exiled from the land, that's the end of the Jewish story. That's not the end of the Jewish story. There's a path, there's always a path to reconnect. There's always the rebounding path. Verse 30, when you are distressed, and all these things happen upon you in the end of days. In other words, when you're distressed because you've been exiled and now subjugated and now steeped in a society, in a culture of idol worship, even in America, right? American Idol. I'm just joking, but steeped in a culture that worships other things other than God and our spiritual purpose. Okay, so when you are distressed, Moses says, and all these things happen upon you in the end of the days, then you will return. V'shafta. Teshuva. This is the word teshuva comes from right here. You will return to the Lord your God and obey him. And the implication is here that God will welcome you with arms. For the Lord your God is a merciful God. He will not destroy you. That's very important. That's a very important message there. Right? God is not cutting you. Did I disconnect? Can you guys hear me? Yes? Okay, God is not cutting you loose. God is not seeking to destroy you. You got it? Okay. Basically, the Torah, Moses telling the people is, history is going to be complicated. There's going to be good times. There's going to be bad times. if and when you turn away from God, you're going to lose the land. You're going to be kicked out of the land. Not forever. You'll be kicked out of the land. You'll be under foreign powers, foreign nations, under the control of others. And in those societies, it's going to be even harder to stay faithful to Judaism, to God. But from the depths of despair, you're going to come back. And when you come back, God is going to be waiting for you, and God is going to be welcoming. God will not let you lose. God will not destroy you. Neither will he forget the covenant of your fathers, which he swore to them. God is not turning his back on the Jewish people. By the way, you can imagine, let me stop sharing for a second. You can imagine how this went on in the, I'm going to call it debate. I don't know, debate and the conversation around Christianity. Because as you may know, one of the big things about Christianity is that they claimed that they were the new Jews. You guys know this about Christianity? Yes. They were the new Jews. Because God lost favor, or the Jewish people lost favor in God's eyes. I mean, everyone knows about the Jewish people, right? But look, they did the wrong thing. They messed up. They lost the land. They lost the temple. They were exiled. So now we have a new people, a new movement, and this is going to curry God's favor. You look at the Torah, you look at the 5 books of Moses, and you realize it's a non-starter. The conversation is a non-starter. There's no replacement. You with me on this? There's no replacement people. Moses says the arc of history is going to be, it's going to be good, it's going to be bad, and then it's going to get good again. That's the way it's going to work. God is never turning his back on you. God is always going to remember the covenant. There's no replacement, right? It's going to pick up. And when we turn it around, it's going to pick back up. All right, now let's continue. Verse 32. For ask now regarding the early days that were before you, since the day that God created man upon the earth, and from one end of the heavens to the other end of the heavens, ask. This is obviously rhetorical. Moses says, ask from the beginning of time, whether there was anything like this great thing, or was the likes of it heard. In other words, this is a reference to Sinai, giving the Torah at Sinai. Moses says, I want you to ask, has there ever been something like the revelation at Sinai from the day the world was created until now? And honestly, until now, July 20th, 2021. Has there ever been anything as spectacular, as incredible, as awe-inspiring, as paradigm shifting as the experience of Sinai? Did a people, verse 33, did people hear God's voice speaking out of the midst of the fires you have heard and live? Or has any God performed miracles to come and take him a nation from the midst of another nation? I love that line. That's referring to the Exodus. You guys, basically, Moses is saying, you guys experienced Sinai. You experienced the Exodus. Okay, it's the next generation, it's their parents, but they were, close enough, right? Has any God, and lowercase God, has any of the gods, Moses is trying to give the argument for why we should stay away from idolatry. So he spoke about, if we were to stumble and get exiled, there's a way back. But now he's circling back and saying, but don't do it. Don't serve idols, because you know enough, you know better. You've seen too much to fall into idolatry. Right? Has anyone seen or heard God like you did at Sinai? Has any God, lowercase God, right? Fake news God, perform miracles to come and take a nation, for the God, a nation from the midst of another nation, as the Jewish people were taken from the midst of Egypt, with trials and signs and with wonders and with war and a strong hand and with an outstretched arm. All of these are references to the plagues and all of the stuff that happened, and with great awesome deeds, as all that the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes. You saw this. It's before your eyes. You have been shown. That's the verse right here. You have been shown in order to know that the Lord, he is God. There is none else besides him. These are some of the most powerful verses in the entire Torah, in this week's Torah portion. I already told you yesterday, we have the 10 commandments, we have the Shema, we have Ata Haresa right here. We say this on Simchas Torah. We say this every Shabbos when the Torah is pulled out. We say this every morning when the Torah is, I think we say this every day when the Torah is pulled out. Essentially, what Moses is saying is, y'all have been shown, you saw God, you saw the miracles, you heard God's voice. You need to know that there's nothing else besides him. There's nothing worth worshiping, serving, bowing down to, subjugating ourselves to. No idols. From the heavens, he let you hear his voice to instruct you. And upon the earth, he showed you his great fire. Right? Remember the fire with the tabernacle? And you heard his words out of the midst of the fire, or the fire at Sinai. Basically, God has shown you, you've heard, you've seen, and you've heard. And because he loved your forefathers and chose their seed after them, and he brought you out of Egypt before him with his great strength, to drive out from before you nations greater and stronger than you. This is because of his love for you, the Jewish people. He loved your forefathers. He chose their children, which is you, the Jewish people. He took you out of Egypt. And what did he do then? Then he drove out nations before you, nations that were greater and stronger than you. Sichon, the king of Amori, Og, the king of Bashan, right? These are the nations that were already driven out, let alone the ones that would be driven out in Israel when the Jews approach, to bring you and give you their land for inheritance as this day. Another powerful verse, which is at the end of the Aleinu, which we say multiple times, 3 times each day. And you shall know this day. Not know this day, not get to know this day, but you should know today and consider. And by the way, this day is whatever day you're reading it. It doesn't mean only that day that Moses spoke to the Jewish people. You should know today, this day, today, July 20th, 2021. Hey, Mark. And consider it in your heart. Know it and consider it. I don't like the word consider. Hashevoisa. Take it to heart. Know it in your head. Take it in your heart. What? That the Lord, he is God in the heaven above and upon the earth below. And once again, it states this idea, this truth, there is none else, nothing else. According to Kabbalah and Chassidus, it means more than God is the only power, God is the only God. It means God is the only thing that exists, the only true thing that exists. If you've studied Kabbalah with me, even for a little bit, I'm sure you're familiar with this concept. If you study Tanya, if you study Kabbalah and Coffee, whatever it is, even Torah studies, and we come around to mystical ideas. Kabbalah teaches that there's nothing other than God. Why? Like nothing, no other God other than God, nothing other than God. Why? Because nothing exists on its own. Nothing can exist on its own. What grants existence? What grants it its definition? What grants its ability to live and be sustained? It's only God. The example is the world is created, yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, which means that the natural state of existence is non-existence. And what keeps something in existence is the divine force that keeps it in existence, which means that essentially this thing that seems so real is not real at all. It's an absence of reality. It's only projected into reality constantly. And I use that word projected like a projector, like a film that's being projected in the theater. Speaking of which, Sunday night, Jewish Summer Cinema returns with our film Fiddler, Miracle of Miracles. Join us. We'll have a projector, right? When you have a projector, the image on the screen is only there as long as that projector is shining, as long as the light, the images is shining. The moment it's cut, it's done. You pull the plug, poof, because it never really existed. It only existed insofar as the light was shining. The same thing is true with existence. Existence only exists insofar as long as God is animating and energizing and vivifying and making things be. The moment that's pulled, if it were to be pulled, I'm not suggesting, right, or recommending that, but if it were to be pulled, nothing exists, which means that even as existence exists, its existence is completely dependent upon the divine source, which means that its core existence is nothing but the divine source manifest and projected into this thing that is being vivified. And so when the Torah says "Ein od," there's none else, it means that literally, and I still have it highlighted here on the screen, verse 39, there is none else, means not that there are no other gods, or you shouldn't worship anything else. None else means no, there's none else. The only true existence is God's existence. Everything else is what we would call, there's true existence, and then there's contingent existence. Everything else is contingent on God willing it into existence. God animating it, forcing it, projecting it into existence. That's called contingent existence. It doesn't self-generate. It's generated by God. The only self-generating true entity is God. Anyway, that's a quick mystical primer into the nature of the universe. No big deal. All right, verse number 40. And you shall observe his statutes and his commandments, which I command you this day, that it may be well with you. One second, let's slow down on this verse. You shall observe God's statutes and God's commandments. Now that we've established, right, Judaism 101, that God is real, God is true, God is the only true existence, the only true power, force, or being, right? And you know this because you saw it and you heard it and you've experienced it. And you should know it in your head and take it to heart and then practice it. So here we go. In head, heart, and practice. So you should observe in practice. That means practice his statutes and commandments. That means the mitzvot, which I command you, which Moses says, I command you this day. In other words, I'm giving you the charge, keep Torah and mitzvot. And he says, if you do this, that it may be well with you and your children after you. In other words, it's going to be good. Follow God, it'll be good. And that you may prolong your days upon the earth, which the Lord your God gives you forever. And if you keep the covenant, if you keep Torah mitzvot, then you'll be in Israel for a little while, as opposed to being evicted. All right, that's the end of reading 2. We're going to jump into reading 3, but let's take some questions, comments, reflections. Jump in, please. Who's got something? Donna, what you got? Let me stop sharing so I can see it. Happy birthday, Donna. Look at you. You already got it. That's so fast. You got your certificate. Forget about it.
It's a certificate from Chabad.org.
Chabad.org thinks of everything.
Yeah.
You see that? Chabad.org thinks of everything.
It has the Torah portion of the week. The Va'ek Anan.
Et Chanan, yeah.
Va'ek Kanan, yeah. Av 12, 5, 7, 8, 1. Happy birthday, Dina, my Jewish name.
See that? Let's change. Listen. I'm all for Hebrew names. Let's go Hebrew names. Dina, Donna's okay, but Dina's like, it's got a Jewish tom to it.
Right.
Sandrine, what's your Hebrew name? Moshe Gedalia, I know yours. Huh? Shalva. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. All right, good. By the way, my Hebrew name, Ari, right? Actually, full name is Yehuda Aryeh. Yehuda Aryeh, which both words mean lion. Yehuda's a lion.
Wow.
I'm not lying. Okay, I'm here all week. All right, let's jump back into the text. But Donna/Dina, or Dina/Donna, happy birthday. Let's jump back into reading.
Erev.
Yeah. But listen. By the way, hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me note this. Very important. When does your birthday begin? Tonight at nightfall. Just like Shabbat, just like the holidays begin at night, so too your birthday begins tonight. Not at 12:01, right? It begins at 9 o'clock, 9:15, somewhere around there. So it's technically today in the English day, sort of, right? Because anyway, you're with me on that. All right, let's jump back in to reading 3. Just when you thought it couldn't get any better, the Torah continues with Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 41, then Moses. Okay, we do get a little bit narration. Remember I told you Deuteronomy is about Moses, it's the transcript of what Moses said to the people, but you do get some third-party narrator, you get it a little bit over here. Then Moses decided to separate 3 cities on the side of the Jordan toward the sunrise. So who's writing this? Not Moses. I mean, well, Moses might have written it, but this is not from the vantage point of Moses, because it would have said, then I decided, or, hey guys, let's separate 3 cities on the side of the Jordan, etc. That's not what it says. It says, then Moses. So again, here we do have the narrator coming in, right? That's the divine narrator. Moses, at this point in the dialogue, monologue, whatever, speaking to the people, he says, guys, we're going to separate the 3 cities of refuge. You remember this? We had this 2 weeks ago. Cities of refuge, supposed to be 6 cities of refuge. These are places where somebody who accidentally and unintentionally takes a life is able to flee and find a safe haven and safety, etc., and also reconnect spiritually, all that good stuff. So there were 3 cities to be designated in the proper borders of the land of Israel, and 3 in what we call the Transjordan, i.e. the east, on the east side of the Jordan River, the place where the 2.5 tribes were going to settle, i.e. where Moses and the Jewish people currently were. So at this point, Moses decided to separate these 3 cities on the side of the Jordan toward the sunrise. Sunrise is in the east, so this means the east of Israel, so that a murderer might flee there. So Moses himself is wanting to get in on the designation. And what are these cities for? So that a murderer might flee there. He who murders his fellow man unintentionally, but did not hate him in time past, it wasn't premeditated, it wasn't, right, that he may flee to one of these cities so that he might live. And what were the 3 cities that he designated? Remember, there were 3 tribes, or 2.5, but 3 tribes. So Bezer or Betzer in the desert in the plain country of the Reubenites, that's one. Number 2 is Ramoth in Gilead of the Gadites. That's the second. Reuben, Gad, and then Manasseh and Golan in the Bashan of the Manassites. Manasseh. Okay, so we have 3 tribes: Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, and 3 cities of refuge for each of those 3 areas that they settled: Betzer, Ramoth, and Golan. Let's continue back to the story, back to Moses' words to the people. And this is the teaching which Moses set before the children of Israel. Again, shortly before his passing, the narrative resumes. Moses said, it continues. These are the testimonies, statutes, and ordinances. Let me explain those 3 in a second, which Moses spoke to the children of Israel when they went out of Egypt. On the side of the Jordan in the valley, that means the eastern side opposite, Beth Pa'ar, in the land of Sichon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, whom Moses and the children of Israel smote after they went out of Egypt, and they possessed his land, the land of Sichon, the king of Amorites, and the land of Og, king of the Bashan, the 2 kings of the Amorites who were on the side of the Jordan toward the sunrise from Aroer, which is by the bank of the river Arnon, to Mount Sion, which is Hermon, and all the plain across the Jordan eastward as far as the sea of the plain under the waterfalls of the hill. Sounds so romantic. Here's what I want to point out. Once again, we're resetting where Moses spoke to the people shortly before his passing: eastern side of the Jordan River, the east of Israel, in the plain, in the land that they conquer now from Sichon and Og, etc. Okay, we got it. But a few things to point out in this preamble, and so that takes us to the end of reading 3, which is perfect. Well, I wanted to do that today. Tomorrow, reading 4, Moses continues his dialogue or his monologue, whatever you want to call it, to the people. Moses will actually continue speaking to the people with words of encouragement. But here, it's kind of like setting it up. So first of all, he kind of divides his words to them. He interrupts by setting up the cities of refuge. Why does he do that? Let Joshua do that, or let somebody else do that. No, as long as he's alive, as long as he's around, as long as this is going to be Jewish land that the 3 tribes these 2.5 tribes will settle, 3 tribes will settle, he's going to be involved hands-on in the setting up of these cities of refuge. It's a special mitzvah. It's special to have the cities of refuge. Moses is not going to miss the opportunity. One other thing is that Moses told the people about the testimonies, statutes, and ordinances. And in the Hebrew, it's eidos, chukim, and mishpatim. Many times we've explained the difference, but I want to do it one more time over here. Testimonies are the types of mitzvot that bear testimony to a certain historical event or another truth of Judaism. So, for example, Shabbat is a testimony. Now, okay, it's a mitzvah, but it's of the mitzvot. There's three categories. It is of the category of eidos, of testimonies. Why? Why is it a testimony? Because Shabbat testifies or bears witness to the fact that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. So any commemoration, mitzvah or observance, anything that commemorates something is a testimony. A testimony is a commemoration. Shabbos, Shabbat, Passover, Sukkot, any of the holidays really are the eidos, are testimonial mitzvot that, or observances that bear testimony, that bear witness, that commemorate something of the past or some Jewish value. Next are statutes. What are chukim? What are statutes? Statutes are not statues, statutes. Statutes are super rational decrees, things that we don't understand with our mind, with our logic, things that we would not have come to on our own. Mitzvot that even once we hear them, we scratch our head and say, huh? Why? What does that mean? What's the purpose of that? I spoke about this a little bit yesterday. Wool and linen, kosher, other laws of ritual purity and impurity, the red heifer. These are all examples of mitzvot that baffle us. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out because they are simply baffling. And those are chukim. And mishpatim, what's translated here as ordinances, which I don't really like the translation, but these ordinances, mishpatim, are the types of mitzvot that are very logical, very rational in the language of the Talmud. Had the Torah not been given, we probably would have at some point come up with them on our own, like do not kill, do not steal, other civil laws that govern societies. You don't need to be Jewish. You don't need to have received God's word of, God's command to recognize the value in these mishpatim type mitzvot. Nonetheless, as we've spoken about many times, including a recent Torah studies class, there is special power in doing the mishpatim, the ones that we do understand, because God said so. So I'll share with you something the Rebbe said multiple times that I think is very powerful. Human beings can come to on their own to recognize, to appreciate the value of life, and to be horrified by taking life. Like, oh no, murder is not good. And yet, if it's up to the human mind, if it's up to us, human beings can justify the most horrific atrocities. We just showed a video Saturday night in synagogue, the night of Tisha B'Av. We showed a documentary film, a powerful documentary film. It's called The Accountant of Auschwitz. And it talks about the trial of Oskar Gruning, who was the accountant of Auschwitz. He was the guy who took in the inventory when Jews were brought to the concentration camp of Auschwitz. He was the one who took the stuff and he confiscated and cataloged all of the items that came in. And ultimately, he was put on trial for being a Nazi and someone involved in war crimes and genocide. Not that he participated necessarily in the killings. There was no proof for that. But as part of the war machine, as part of that killing machine, as part of the concentration camp, the court found him guilty and sentenced him to prison. He died before actually serving his sentence. He was older, but it set a precedent of how we look at war crimes. It's not only necessarily somebody who does the killing, God forbid, but even somebody, a guard, an accountant, anybody involved is part of that machine. Why am I saying this? The Rebbe spoke about the Holocaust multiple times on many different topics. But the Rebbe more than once, exclaimed the danger of leaving morality up to human beings. It's not only morality, leaving life in the hands of human beings. These Nazis who were involved in the killing of millions, hundreds of thousands, and all told millions of Jews and others, they went to sleep at night and slept They loved their families, their wives, and their children. They went to plays. They listened to classical music. They drank their whiskey. They weren't. It's easy to say they were barbarians, and that's it. What's more difficult is to realize that they were human beings who acted barbarically. And how could you fathom such a thing? Simple. They justified it. It's war. This is the enemy. You have to get rid of the enemy, eliminate the enemy, whatever it is, whatever justification worked. I loathe expressing justification, right? I don't even want to express it. But in their minds, there was a justification, which is how they could live with themselves. And the Rebbe said, I was in Berlin in the 1930s. The Rebbe was in Berlin in the 1930s. The Rebbe studied famously in the University of Berlin. He studied at Sorbonne also in France, but he studied in the University of Berlin before that, as he was moving westward through Europe in the time preceding and during the war. The Rebbe said, I was in Berlin and they were filled with scientists and academics and all the intellectuals, all the greatest intellectuals. And what did they do? They exterminated 6 million of our people, including 1.5 million children. That's where the sophistication, the intelligence, the academia, all of the degrees, that's where it ended. And how is it possible? Because their morality was not based on an absolute divine morality. It was subjective human morality. Oh, if it's my morality, so I'll decide when it starts and when it stops. If I decided that human beings have life, some human beings have life, others don't. When it's up to me, watch out. When it's up to God, it's absolute. And so Moses was telling the Jewish people the Eidos, the Chukim, the Mishpatim, and Chassidus tells us, and the Rebbe taught us, that even the Mishpatim, even the rational civil laws, keep them like a chok. Keep them like you do those super rational degrees that you only do because God said so. Because otherwise, you're going to start picking and choosing and may not end up, obviously, right, to that extent, right, to the Holocaust, obviously, right? We're talking about us. But we could very easily start justifying and rationalizing all sorts of things that we know are unhealthy. Why? Because we left it up to our own brains, our own minds. Our minds are the greatest gift, but also the greatest liability that we have. Often in Judaism advocates, and Chabad Hasidic philosophy advocates for us on when inappropriate situations to surrender our mind to accept a higher authority, which can keep us in check. Absolutely. All right, that's it for today.
Ari, can I say
what Daily Power Parsha? What's the moral of the story? We can't trust ourselves always, so be careful. And what else did we have as far as the moral of the story? We also had the cities of refuge. We had the idea that we've seen enough divine revelation and experienced enough of God's salvation and blessings and etc. to stay on the straight and narrow. And that applies to us, you and I today. It's part of the gift of Torah is that we can read about this and we re-experience, put ourselves back in that place so that it can be as true to us today as it was then, or at least we can try that it should be as true to us today as it was then. All right, questions, comments, Mark? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll ask you two things.
Sure.
The first is, why is there a recounting of what's already happened? That's my first question. And the second thing, I guess, is more of a comment to a question too. I hate to say this of the Rebbe, but to me, that's an oversimplification that God wasn't there, which is why the Nazis did the horror they did. Because throughout history, Jews have been slaughtered in the name of religion with the Crusades and the Inquisition. And I've even heard it said that if it weren't for religion, fewer Jews, I mean, maybe other religions, there'd be more Jews living. So that's
good. Both excellent points. So let's address them, one by one. So number one, first point is, why are we talking about the Exodus and Sinai again? It's like, what's going on here? So the context of the whole book of Devarim, the whole book of Deuteronomy, is Moses' final words to the Jewish people before his passing. And so in the context of encouraging them and giving them their final charge before he checks out, he's trying to make sure that they don't stumble in idolatry. And so he says, guys, you remember the Exodus, God loves you. Remember Sinai, you heard God's voice. Don't serve idols. That's the message. So it's not so much that the Torah is kind of convoluting the timeline. It's simply Moses speaking to the people and taking a trip down memory lane for the express purpose of directing the people before his passing. That's number one. Number two, you're right. Many Jews and others have been slaughtered in the name of religion. So the question is, one second, if one believes in a higher authority, that's an automatic guarantee that life will be preserved. What about even in modern times, right? People say, in the name of God, I will kill these people. So maybe God is not the answer. So that's your question, I believe. So a few points. Number one, you're correct. You're correct. If one has a corrupt understanding of God and a corrupt message, yeah, you can pull that out to justify, or to at least, justify, but allegedly justify and rationalize the killing. So correct. That's not a guarantee. In modern times, I would say in the 20th century, far more lives were taken in a godless context than in a God context. And what I refer to is Nazi Germany and Stalin. They both did not commit their atrocities in the name of religion, in the name of God. They committed it in other. Now, with the following caveat, I'm not a historian. I am not super well versed in all the nuances. My understanding is, at least in modern times, the atrocities, and Stalin is upwards of 20 million people. Is that a correct number? I believe that's the number that I've heard. Upwards of 20 million. Huh?
I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I've heard upwards of 20 million. We can look it up. That was not in the name of religion or jihad or crusades or, that sort of thing. Now, historically, yes, Jews have historically been persecuted under the guise of religion, 100%. And even today, there's stuff that happens under the guise of religion. There's what the Rebbe is saying is that Torah can keep us in check. Yeah, some sort of misbelief in a God that wants to see these people killed, yeah, that's going to end up in loss of life. But the way we understand Torah, I'm saying the way we have Torah today, the way we understand it, the framing, which is Torah has been given to bring peace into the world and not the opposite, that's not going to end up in bloodshed. It's just not. It's not. You can look at Torah and say, what about this verse about destroying Amalek? Or what about this verse about destroying the 7 nations of Canaan? And I'll tell you, that's not a commandment we have today. That's not an enduring commandment. What's the command we have today? Peace, love, Torah, and that the enduring legacy of Torah is not that stuff. That was to understand it. That require that's another question. And that I don't know that I have the tools to answer that question. Why then was it? I don't know that I have the tools to answer that question. I've raised it before myself, and I've told you straight up that I struggle with that question. But the Torah that we have, that Judaism as we have it, as we've had it for the last several thousand years, is not a violent religion. God does not call for murder. God does not call for jihad, God, whatever you want to call it. God does not call for that. And so when the Rebbe says that it takes a little surrender of the human mind to accept the divine moral authority, he's talking about the Jewish perspective, which is about the value, the absolute value of life. And as Donna likes to mention, Judaism's Gifts to the World, that was one of the classes two of the classes. We had the absolute value of human life. And also it was about, there's two of them on human life. It was like the value of life and the value of, I don't know, whatever. I don't remember exactly the topics, but that's what I meant. But good points, because in the name of religion and God, lots of lives have been taken throughout history, Jewish lives as well. All right, good. I mean, not good for that, but as we summarize our session today, because we are at 101, this is DPP 101. Let's close it out with some inspiration. Let's remember to sometimes we got to let go and let God. Sometimes we need to surrender to a higher authority. After all, if it's good for Hebrew National, it's got to be good for us. It's kosher. All right, we'll see you guys tomorrow. DPP tomorrow, Wednesday, is online. Remember, we've switched the in-person from Wednesday to Monday. So DPP is online tomorrow, 12, tomorrow night, in person and online, hybrid. We have the hybrid Torah studies. One of the features that we added for this year, as we're designing all the stuff for the upcoming year, is we're putting on all the flyers and all the banners and all the stuff, like a little diagonal line in the top left corner that says right away, visual, in person, online, or both. That way, whenever you see something, you're like, oh, a barbecue. Is it going to be on Zoom? No, in-person only barbecue, because that would be super difficult to pull off. I should mention everyone's cordially and warmly invited. Even if you're out of town, there's still time to make it in for August 1st to join us for the barbecue. It's going to be a blast, great food, Southern barbecue, real deal. Southern barbecue, talking about like pulled brisket sliders and coleslaw and potato salad and corn and, pies and whatnot and lemonade and all that good stuff. So you don't want to miss this. It's coming up August 1st. But before then, we have all sorts of other good stuff. Check out the website, intownjewishacademy.org. As always, we turn somehow into a commercial by the end of the class, just to let you all know what is coming up.
PSA, right. PSA, public service announcement.
PSA, exactly. All right, friends, I will let you all go.
Do you know if the Rabbi went back to France after World War II?
No, he didn't go back. The Rebbe did not go back. Once he arrived in America, he did not travel internationally. He didn't even travel much out of Brooklyn. The few times he traveled were to the summer camp in the Catskills. He went a few times.
Catskill, yeah.
Rebbe did not take a day.
It was in the
Rebbe had zero
Rebbe's
vacation.
encounter with Shabbat.
Yeah. I don't know if I read that one. Yeah. But anyway.
It was someone who started a Rabbit camp in the Catskill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Rabbi Lazar. By the way, that Rabbi Lazar is the father of the chief rabbi of Russia, Bar Lazar. He's Italian. The chief rabbi, listen, the chief rabbi of Russia is Italian. And his wife, the chief rabbi of Israel, let me try this again. The chief rabbi of Russia is Bar Lazar. His, hold on. His wife or his mother or both?
Yeah, because they were saying that this Rabbi Lazar, after he was Rabbi in Milan.
Yeah. He's for sure Milan. He's Milano. Milano? Is that what they call it?
Who's our chief rabbi? Do we have one? Do we have a chief rabbi?
No, we don't have there's no chief rabbi in America. I know, like England's a chief rabbi, South Africa's a chief rabbi, Russia's a chief rabbi. All these places have chief rabbis. I'm running for chief rabbi. You'll vote for me if it ever gets. By the way, I once taught a class on American Jewish history, and we discussed a JLI class, 6-week course on American Jewish history, and we discussed why is it that America doesn't have a chief rabbi. There was an attempt in the early 1900s to establish a chief rabbi for the United States, and it failed spectacularly. Too much to talk about for right now, but it was like
couldn't agree.
It was disaster. Anyway, all right, friends. Great to see you all. Stay strong, stay happy, stay positive. No classes tonight. We're just getting ready for the next semester starting in August. We're gonna have a full schedule in August. Tomorrow day, tomorrow night, and the party rolls on. We'll see you guys. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Pleasure. Great to see you all.
Thank you.